foreign land. This story happened about 15 years ago, and I still shudder when I recall those events as if they happened yesterday. My life changed after that dreadful night. Perhaps we, mere mortals, need to experience something shocking to realize certain things, something that shakes us awake. Only after such an experience do we wake up and start thinking differently, start valuing what previously seemed mundane. We were very young, having just graduated from college. I always had many admirers, and I absolutely loved the attention from men. However, I chose him Dima, the sharp-tongued troublemaker. Our love was quite tumultuous. We often fought. I constantly left him, but always came back. Dima was a very sharp and hot-tempered person, and he had been showered with female attention since kindergarten, so being with him was not easy. I couldn't confide in my envious friends about our relationship troubles, because I knew they wouldn't understand and might even be glad that things weren't smooth between Dima and me. I could only share my woes with Lesha, my best childhood friend. I knew he was in love with me but hid it. Lesha was always there in the toughest moments of my life, supporting me in everything. He would drop everything if I needed his help. Friends like that can be hard to find even in a lifetime. However, I perfectly understood that my relationship with Dima was poisoning my best friend's life. But youth is often foolish and blind, making mistakes is its nature. Another fight with Dima, and he leaves everything behind to go to another city to his friend. I'm almost certain he quickly found a temporary replacement for me there. In tears and feeling distraught, I ran to Lesha, who of course didn't turn away from me. To distract me, he invited me to go out into nature with his friends to relax. I agreed. The weather was wonderful. We searched for a place to stop for a long time. Eventually, we chose a small clearing that we reached through the forest. Not far away, a small abandoned village could be seen. We laughed, talked about everything under the sun. I really got distracted from my problems. I felt light and happy. The company was great, and Lesha never left my side. Sometimes I felt like I was making a huge mistake by rejecting such a person. But then I would remember Dima. I did love him, or maybe I was just obsessed with him. I don't know the right word for it. Even now, I don't understand myself back then. It got dark, and we started to head home. Everyone else had already left, only Lesha and I remained. While we were putting things in his car, we chatted and laughed a bit. It was completely dark by the time we set off. The headlights illuminated the road ahead. It was already quite chilly, so I turned on the car heater. The bumpy road went straight through the forest, past the abandoned village. It was no longer visible in the night darkness. About 300 meters into the forest, it appeared ... Everything happened in an instant. Someone, as if from nowhere, appeared right in our path. All I managed to see were mad, bloodshot eyes staring straight at us, and some tattered clothes. Lesha slammed on the brakes, and at that moment, the figure darted into the dark forest with a horrific, crazed laugh. We were both terrified, unable to catch our breath from fear. I had no idea who or what it was, but I was very scared and suggested we get out of there quickly. I'm not sure how long we drove, but the forest seemed endless. By my calculations, we should have reached the highway long ago, but it was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, the car stalled and stubbornly refused to move further. Lesha was stunned. He had checked the car before we left, and there were no issues. What had happened? We got out. I shone the flashlight while Lesha rummaged under the hood, looking for problems. Everything seemed fine. It was already quite cold, our breath visible in the air. Lesha threw up his hands in confusion. The situation was completely baffling. Suddenly, we heard twigs snapping. I quickly turned around and shone the flashlight into the dark forest. Nothing. I shone it left and right, only trees and bushes. Silence. Then something flashed in the leaves, something that had been silently lurking all this time. Everything rustled and trembled for a moment, and I almost dropped the flashlight out of fear. In the pitch-black forest, there was definitely someone there, playing with us. Lesha grabbed me and put me back in the car. He sat in the driver's seat and locked everything up so no one could get in. I was shaking with fear. From time to time, I heard echoes of that horrifying, insane laughter, as if it was everywhere, coming from all directions at once. Lesha kept turning his head, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was tormenting us. The light in the car suddenly went out. The flashlight in my hand also went dead. Tears ran down my cheeks. Lesha continued to try starting the car, nervously, but to no avail. Someone started rocking us. The whole car shook. Who could easily rock a heavy car? We couldn't even scream, we were so scared. There was no one around, almost nothing visible, just darkness. And in that darkness, there was something that clearly wanted to get to us. Knocking on the doors began, but no one was visible. It was just something pounding on the car doors with such force that the sound drowned out everything else. Lesha held me tightly. I think he was scared too, but he didn't show it. It felt like a dream, a long and terrible nightmare. That creepy laughter, turning into a scream, circled around the car, shaking it and pounding on it furiously. Then, suddenly, everything went quiet. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Lesha held me tightly in his arms. He promised me we would be okay and that he would get me out of there. I cried and wanted to believe him. Lesha couldn't lie. Silence reigned. Complete. Only the heartbeat in my ears. Only the pounding in my temples. Nothing else. As if nothing had happened. We didn't move. It was scary even to blink, not wanting to disturb the calm with a clumsy movement. I lifted my head to look around. It seemed like nothing was there anymore. I slowly turned my gaze to the driver's window, and like a jolt of electricity, there it was, a horrible, hideous face, covered in blood, with only those mad, enormous eyes visible, glistening with insanity and cruelty, those teeth, sharp and crooked and old bears, clumps of hair sticking out. The moonlight faintly touched that ugly face, curiously, almost with a grin, staring straight at us through the window all this time, but what I saw etched into my memory forever. That silence was false. The creature had been quietly lurking, watching us, enjoying our helplessness. I screamed, and the thing immediately fled. I'm not sure if Lesha saw the same thing I did since he was sitting with his back to the window. I wanted to curl up into the smallest, tiniest ball and run away from there, as far as possible. Lesha suddenly grabbed a big hunting knife from the bag on the back seat and dashed out of the car. He stood in the pitch dark and shouted. He was calling out to that creature, wanting to kill it once and for all. I sobbed in the car, begging him to come back. If something happened to him, I would be completely alone in this hellish place. No matter how much Lesha tried to draw attention to himself, no one responded. I sat in the car, trembling all over. At some point I felt something cold running down my shoulder, then down my arm. A nasty metallic smell suddenly filled my nose. I looked down at my arm and saw a thick trail of blood running down it. I turned around. It was sitting there, sitting and smiling, so that its crooked fangs glowed with a disgusting yellow light. It touched my shoulder with its clawed, ugly hand. I screamed wildly and ran out of the car to Lesha. He caught me. Now even the car wasn't safe. How did it get in there? I don't understand. We stood on the dark forest road, scared and defenseless. I clung to Lesha. He was my last hope. Only he could get us out of there. Let's run. We can't go back to the car, Lesha said. We sprinted down the road, running with all our might. The moon barely lit anything. Its light weakly broke through the fluffy treetops to the ground. It was cold and insanely scary. I imagined it everywhere. That disgusting laugh echoed in my ears, and the strong smell of blood still lingered in my nose. I felt nauseated from these sensations and from fear. It seemed like we had been running forever. Time stretched like rubber, and there was no end in sight to our torment. Our strength was running out, muscles were hard and burning, and I was ready to collapse onto the road. Lesha kept picking me up. He was almost dragging me. It felt like a dream, with a sense of lost time and a sticky reality. I can't put into words what it was like. It returned suddenly and unexpectedly. I don't know where it had been all this time. Maybe running was pointless. The creature jumped out of the bushes and knocked Lesha down, his knife flying out of his hands. I fell to the ground, hitting my head so hard that my ears rang. I lay there, seeing Lesha trying to hit the creature looming over him, swinging its long, crooked limbs. It kept laughing, screaming, screeching. I tried to get up, but excruciating pain shot through my body, and all my muscles seized up. That vile creature pinned Lesha to the ground with its limbs, holding him down. They stared at each other, and blood dripped down onto Lesha. He lay there, immobile, and I didn't understand why. Maybe the creature was that strong, or maybe it had enchanted him. I grabbed a nearby stone and threw it at our pursuer. With a pig-like squeal, it rushed back into the darkness. Lesha lay on the ground, not moving. I saw his wide, frightened eyes. Struggling to my feet, I ran to him immediately. I extended my hand. He stood up, and I realized he had seen something horrible in that creature's eyes. "We shouldn't have come here. This is foreign land." "I'm sorry," was all Lesha said. I tried for a long time to find out what he meant by foreign land, but my friend never wanted to talk about it again. Exhausted, battered, and dusty, we walked for a long time. Just walked forward on that endless road. Our legs dragged like rags, I no longer cared. If that creature jumped out at us again, I probably wouldn't have run. Better to die quickly than to keep hiding. To keep fighting. Lisha just walked silently, gripping my hand tightly. I think he, too, had reached that point where he didn't care anymore, where his own life felt burdensome. It felt like an eternity had passed. We reached a small village at dawn. Along the way, I occasionally saw the glint of mad eyes in the bushes and heard that awful laugh, but the creature no longer dared to attack us. I didn't know then why it suddenly left us alone. Maybe it was afraid of the dawn. I don't know. We knocked on the first house we came to, exhausted and bedraggled. An elderly woman, very kind-looking, opened the door. She gasped when she saw us and immediately let us in. We told her everything, explaining where our car was. We needed a phone. While Lisha went to call someone, the elderly lady told me we had chosen a bad place to rest. Near that clearing where we had set up was an abandoned village. It had once been a village of sorcerers, a very old place steeped in black magic. Misfortunes constantly happened around that village. People often got sick and died. Because of this, residents from all the neighboring villages decided to take matters into their own hands and burned the sorcerers at the stake like witches. This was a long time ago, back when no one would have been severely punished for it. And no one knew, as the village was far from larger settlements. The old lady said the restless souls of those sorcerers still roam those places in infernal forms. They are stuck between worlds, punished for their sorcery in life and hating all the living. They need human souls. By taking them, they grow stronger. These creatures thicken time around you, suffocate you, torment you however they can. Nothing scares them. On their land, they are the masters. Our friends arrived a few hours later. They found it hard to believe our story. I understand them. It was hard to believe in our sanity at that moment. We found our abandoned car. Strangely enough, it started right away, and with our friends accompanying us, we drove it home, away from that cursed place. Lesha kept silent. He only occasionally looked at me as if he knew something very sad and sorrowful but couldn't tell me, no matter how much I pleaded with him. A while after this incident, Lesha died. He unexpectedly found out he was seriously ill and wasted away in a few months. I was by his side the whole time, crying constantly. I couldn't believe my Lesha would leave me. I held his hand, and he looked into my eyes with devotion, knowing there was nothing he could do. He couldn't stay with me any longer. I forgot about Dima and finally realized that the one I could truly rely on and trust had been by my side all this time. But in my foolishness, I had missed my chance at happiness. After Lesha's death, his mother gave me a note from him, in which my beloved friend wrote about how much he loved me, that he would always be with me, and that I should keep living no matter what. In the letter, he described what he had seen in that creature's eyes. He saw his death. He literally felt his soul irresistibly drawn to a black abyss into which our pursuer was pulling it. Mentally, that creature offered Lesha my soul in exchange for his freedom, but Lesha refused and saw his death. When the creature fled, the vision stopped immediately. But now my friend knew he was doomed. That's why the evil spirit didn't touch us for the rest of the way. It got what it wanted. There are things we only understand after a certain shock. It's a pity that the most important things only come to us when everything is lost and nothing can be changed. Almost 15 years have passed, and I still hate myself for losing my happiness. I still love him, and it seems to me that he really is always by my side.